And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Tim Swan, who will introduce our Moreton Lecture.
Thank you, Bill. Last year, the ACR established the Commission on Patient and Family-Centered Care. The Commission's charge is to ensure that high-quality radiologic care is provided in a manner that incorporates the needs, wants, values of our patients and communities, ultimately leading to improved healthcare satisfaction. That commission hit the ground running, and its work has led to partnerships between the ACR, participating practicing radiologists, and patients. All of that has propelled the ACR into being recognized as a leader in patient and family-centered care. Earlier this meeting, you heard President Kushner encourage us to aggressively adopt patient engagement to foster and improve our value proposition. This 23rd Moreton Lecture continues that theme. This annual lecture series was established in 1993 in recognition of the outstanding contributions to radiology and the medical profession by Dr. Robert Moreton. Our invited speaker this morning is Andy DeLao. Mr. DeLao created an alter ego social media presence using the moniker Cancer Geek, where he's developed a large following through patient advocacy and developing patient communities. He currently is the marketing manager in global molecular imaging and computed tomography services for a major healthcare technology firm. He spent 3 years leading a national oncology team focused on having conversations with customers and collaborating to improve patient care and access. He also worked with patient communities to develop and build 2 new hospitals and 6 new cancer centers, including renovation and expansion of oncology service lines and facilities. Mr. DeLao has led national grants in research, focusing on multidisciplinary care and patient navigation for the National Cancer Institute and the NCI Community Cancer Centers program. Importantly, he has developed new models of reimbursement based on delivering care to patients and to their teams. Patients on their own terms. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Andy DeLao to the stage as he presents the 2016 Moreton Lecture that he has entitled Step Out of the Dark and Into the Light. Mr. DeLao.
Thank you, Dr. Swan. Before I get started, I'd first like to thank the College of Radiology for inviting me to spend some time this morning and talking to all of you about some stories about my perception and what I see for the future and how I see radiology plays into all of that. More importantly, as I was preparing for this, I actually went back and I started to look at the previous Moreton lecturers. And in looking at that, I became very humbled by the fact that the ACR decided to take a slight risk and ask someone like me, who dresses differently, who thinks differently, and puts patients sort of at the center of everything that we do. And so with that, I would like to thank all of you for giving me some of your time and some of your attention this morning, because I am deeply humbled by this experience. So with that, let's start to talk about the story that I want to talk about this morning, which is the art of radiology. And it's really about the fact that I'm encouraging everyone in the college to step out of the dark and into the light. But with all talks like this, we got to get some of the house cleaning stuff done. So as Dr. Swan said, I am the Global Marketing Officer for GE Healthcare, where I lead a $1.6 billion vertical. So this is the first and last time you'll hear me talk about GE. More importantly, I am the co-founder and CEO of a group called My Ideal Patient Experience, where it's really about taking patients that are experts in their diagnosis and advocacy that also happen to be marketers, engineers, TV broadcasters, news anchors, marketers, and bringing them to the forefront to actually address the challenges that we face in healthcare, and then design and redesign with that in mind, and then layering on top all of the other things that we think about as far as facility structure, clinical workflows, etc. In addition to that, I'm the Chief Clinical and Strategy Officer for an organization called American Asian Cancer Centers. We're currently in the process of building 20 to 25 cancer centers in Asia. In addition to that, we're actually trying a new model called risk reduction centers, which are all focusing on bringing imaging and new clinical workflows to China. And lastly, I'm the founder of something called The Patient Scene. It's a weekly series in which we actually talk about the biggest healthcare issues that are going on, but we do it from the perspective of a patient. So with most lectures like this, it's all about the goals and objectives. For me, I happen to be a storyteller, so I think of this slightly differently. Today we're going to take a journey, and we're going to talk about some different chapters. So first, we're going to get to the essence of why we're all here, why we do the work that we do. And then we're going to move ahead into the next chapter, and we're going to talk about how we got here today. I'm going to make some leap of faith assumptions and some hypotheses that you may or may not necessarily agree with, but I hope it will cause a slight bit of discomfort, because it's in those moments of discomfort in which change is apparent and the opportunities happen. In addition to that, we're going to talk about some economics. I'm going to keep it very simple because I'm a simplistic person, and I'm probably the least smartest person in this room. But we're going to talk about the experience economy, the connection economy, and finally, we're going to give some simple practices about how all of you as radiologists can go back to your day jobs next week and start building your own tribe. So why do we do the work that we do? In 2009, Simon Sinek did a TED Talk that actually addressed this topic. What he wanted to do is he wanted to understand why leaders, as well as organizations and manufacturers, what separated the great from just the mediocre. And so he started to look at people like Steve Jobs, the obvious, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, and he started to look at companies like Apple. And he kind of said, well, what is the difference? And so as he started to do his research, what he noticed is that it kind of came down to three things. Almost every single company talks about what they do. It's the products and services that you generate. That's simple, that's easy. If you're in radiology and someone asks you, well, what is it that you do? Generally, you're going to say, it's the interpretation of the images. That's what we do. Okay, great. But then when you start to talk to some other organizations and you ask, how do you actually go about doing that? Sometimes that becomes a little bit more difficult, because this is really about that differentiation and that value proposition. What makes you different from somebody else? But very few organizations and leaders can actually talk about why they do the work that they do. And so most of us say, well, hey, that's easy. We do it because we want to get paid. But that's the wrong answer. The revenue and the payment is a result of why you do the work that you do. Why we do the work that we do, it's the purpose, it's the cause, it's the belief. It's the sole existence and reason of why we are there, why we show up to do our work. And so periodically, I like to start to think, why do I do the work that I do? I could do so many different things, but I choose to be in this field. I choose to be here this morning with all of you. So why do I do it? As Dr. Swan mentioned, I got into this field of radiation oncology. That's what I went to school for. So I have a bachelor's in radiation oncology, I have a master's in medical physics and dosimetry, and that's what I did. And the reason why I did it is because there's three things that motivated me as a young student. And it was really about technology. Hey, they're going to pay me to work with all this really cool, expensive technology. The second one is I like to be challenged. So each day was a new challenge that I was facing. And the last one was people. I'm a people person. I want to be able to make a change in someone's life. And so that's why I did the work that I did. And so I went ahead and I started doing this work. For about 3 years, I was able to touch patients, I was able to create treatment plans, I was able to work with radiologists and do some pretty cool things. So much so that at the age of 28, a board of directors was crazy enough to say, hey, we've seen you do a renovation, we've seen you transition from analog to digital, we've seen you do a lot of different things. What happens if we give you $25 million, 8 months, in the dead of winter in Wisconsin, and build us an entire oncology service line? I said, okay, I'm crazy enough to do this. But I'm going to do it slightly different, because what the board gave me was a directive to be on time, on budget, and to open up and be different than everyone else. So instead of just building a building and hiring physicians to do the work, I said, why are we actually here? We're here for the patients. And so I went out to the patients and I asked them, when you think of cancer, what are the things that you think about? What motivates you? And by and large, through and through, what all of them said was this concept of time. How do I go from, oh my goodness, I think there's something wrong with me, to that point in time where you know what's wrong with you and what to do to get you better again? And so it's this clock, this internal mechanism inside of us. And so I decided, you know what? I can do something about this. If the national average for that is 10 days, it can be as high as 60 if it's lung cancer in the US. How do we fix that? How do we bend the curve? Well, it's simple. The time-limiting step comes to imaging and pathology. So I got the right radiologist and the right pathologist in the room at the same time, and we talked this out. And we figured out how to agree to get this to 5 days or less. And before we opened up, we actually agreed to do this in 72 hours or less for all comers. And that took a feat of work, but it all started with radiology and pathology. So fast forward, and I'd like to introduce you to my father. So 2.5 years ago, I was traveling. I got a call from my dad, said, hey, I'm not feeling very well. So I rushed back home, got him into the system, and within 72 hours, we realized that he had stage 4 metastatic cancer. And so at that point in time, I continued to think about how do I sort of hack and bend this system to help my father. But my father gave me a gift. He reminded me of why I do the work that I do. And the reason why is because I have the ability to listen to all stakeholders. I had the ability to listen to my father and understand that he did not want more treatment. What he wanted is he wanted to go home, get his affairs in order, and be with his loved ones. And so 6 weeks later, my father passed away at home. But that's why I'm here. I'm here to make a dent in the universe because I do something better than a lot of other people do. I listen to understand, and I can tell stories and articulate them with various lenses so that it builds collaboration amongst all stakeholders. So inside of healthcare, what does that mean? It means that we've got the 5 Ps inside of healthcare. And so I like to simplify things, but at the end of the day, it begins with the patient. So how do you understand why you do the work that you do from the patient's perspective, especially inside of radiology? And then how do you take that and how do you articulate that story? How do you use the right words to build a world, to tell a story, to the referring physicians, which are providers, to the payers, to the politicians, the regulatory bodies, and to the pharmaceutical companies or medical technology companies? That's what I do very well. And I think the world of radiology has the ability at this point in time to do the same. But in order to do that, you have to step out of the dark and into the light. So I happen to be slightly different than Dr. Emanuel, and I actually have a lot of friends in radiology. So because I have a lot of friends, I happen to ask 6 of them, and I asked them, why do you do the work that you do? And lo and behold, across the board, if you simplify the essence of what they said, it's because they wanted to have a profound impact in the life of a patient. They wanted to be able to do something that would go ahead and impact the patients during their journey inside of healthcare. And I was like, wow, like they get it. The reason why they spent all of this time going to medical school and residency and doing fellowships and doing all the work that they do is because they do it for the patient. They understand that the words that they use in the interpretations of images build my world. They build the world for other patients like me. So for me, it's all about correlating to other things that are more common, which is about art. So because I happen to have grown up in radiation oncology, I get the fact that taking images of each individual person, it's kind of like artwork. And so what does an artist do? But they're generous. They do something risky that makes a change in somebody else. And that's what radiologists do on a daily basis. So if you do that on a daily basis, what you're really doing is you're choosing to connect, because that's what it means to be human. But yet the problem is that the words that you use in the interpretation of images that you put in the reports, that story, it's not being told by you. It's being told by other people. It's being told by primary care and internal med and all of the other ologists inside of the healthcare system. So what is the difference between being a doctor and being a physician? So the simple definition is that a doctor is a person that's licensed to practice medicine versus a physician who is skilled in the art of healing. So again, I think this is the right time and opportunity for radiologists to make a decision. Do you want to be a doctor or do you want to be a physician? So how did we get here? If my 6 friends that are radiologists said that the reason why they wanted to become radiologists was because that they wanted to have a profound impact in the lives of patients, how did we get to where we are today? How did we get to a situation in which Dr. Manuel comes up here and says certain things that we don't want to hear? So again, I went out to my friends that happen to be radiologists, and I asked them a different question. Who do you believe has been the biggest influence inside of healthcare? And this time, none of them could agree. There was no common thread. So I decided to go out and ask some of my other friends. I asked pathologists, I asked oncologists, I even asked plastic surgeons. And then I went ahead and I expanded that beyond the borders of the US to Europe, to India, to China. And again, there was no common thread. There was no common message. So I said, okay, it's time for me to create my own hypothesis. We'll see if the slide advances. There we go. Sorry about that. So my hypothesis is that it's Henry Ford. And so you'll kind of look at me a little bit strange and say, I don't get it. This is a guy that made Model Ts. What the heck does he have to do with healthcare? Well, again, my big topic is about the words that we use. So what did Henry Ford do in the Industrial Revolution? He created the assembly line. And because he created the assembly line, he put a bunch of technology and sort of put it in the right process so that you could assemble things and make these widgets. And so it was all about production. If I use an assembly line and I use the right technology and I put it in the right process, I can go ahead and I can mass produce cars. I can make bigger, better, faster widgets. And then I can start to think about quality. What is the quality of the widget that I'm making? And how do I go ahead and continue to use technology and the assembly line to make bigger, faster, better widgets? Which gets into process improvement. So if I go ahead and I start to focus on process improvement, I can think about quality, I can improve quality, and again. And how do I make this happen? It's with the people. If I motivate and I incentivize the people to go ahead and do this work, then it continues to happen. So where's the correlation? So today, I consider the hospital to be nothing different than a factory. It's the medical industrial complex. And I'm guilty of it. I built service lines, no different than an assembly line. It was a bunch of people with a bunch of technology to go ahead and produce a certain outcome. Same thing with an emergency department. You can extend this to your primary care and your internal medicine physicians. And then it's about all the other ologists. It's the cardiologist, the oncologist, the neurologist, the nephrologist, the endocrinologist, all the other ologists. They're all there. But the new Henry Ford are the people that sit in the C-suite. It's the hospital administrators. It's the people that are running the business of healthcare. And so the language that they use and the words that they choose tell a very different story than the one of why we all went into medicine, why we decided to become radiologists, or why I decided to work in radiation oncology. So it's about how do you choose the right metrics and insights to tell a different story? Because the story that we're telling today is one about productivity, capacity utilization, patient satisfaction, compliance. It's things like CG and HCAP scores, and it's about days cash on hand. What the heck does any of that have to do with patients? So the words that we use tell a story to ourselves and to the people that we work with on a daily basis that has nothing to do with patients. There's no direct correlation. And that all comes because we've industrialized the medical complex. So of course, that's why we're here. But people say, well, we measure the metrics and it's the right metrics and so we get the right story. Well, I happen to be a fan of basketball. And last year, the Los Angeles Clippers were ahead of the Houston Rockets 3-1. And because of that metric, they had a greater than 93% chance of winning the series. And they obviously believed that story because the Houston Rockets came back and beat them because they didn't show up for 4 games. And so the question that I have is, if they would have changed the metric and used different words and told themselves a different story, would it have been a different outcome? And so from my perspective, it's about defining and measuring the right metrics. And inside of radiology, I think that's ever more important because 80% of the metrics that we measure to try and improve outcomes inside of healthcare are crap. Because what I've found through my own personal journey and through my own personal work is that the majority of stuff inside of healthcare begins with 2 ologists, the radiologist and the pathologist. I happen to have a surgeon who's a friend who always came with this moniker, and forgive me because it's a little archaic, but it was always, hey, Andy, you need to realize if there's no meat, you can't treat, and the only way that you find the meat is through imaging. But that holds true. So I think we have to ask ourselves, what is the right metric that ties back to why we do the work that we do so that we tell ourselves a different story? But not just internally here inside the college. This story needs to get outside because right here you all know what the story is. The problem is that the other 5 Ps have no clue because you're not owning your words. You're letting somebody else tell your story. So there I'm going to pause, and I'm going to move to the next chapter, which is about economics and economy. So there's something called the experience economy. So our economy has evolved after the post-industrial revolution. So in 1998, there was an article that came out of a book called Welcome to the Experience Economy. And in this book, they actually talked about the evolution of going from commodities to goods to services to this point in time in which people were willing to buy based on their emotional experience. So what does this mean? Well, the economists use a simple and easy to understand thing about birthday cakes. So we've got children, we've had birthdays, we know what a birthday cake is. So from a commodities perspective, for maybe a couple of dollars, you can go ahead and you can get out the basic ingredients. You can put them together, you can spend some time, you can bake a cake, you take the cake out, you go ahead and frost it, you can have a party, then you have to clean up. It's a lot of work. And you know what? I've got production metrics that I have to worry about at work because that's how I get paid. So then they went ahead and we went from commodities to goods. So now I can go to the store and for $3 I can buy a box that I can then take home, add some water to, I can bake it, then I have to frost it, then I can have the party, then I have to clean up. It saves me some time, which is great, because I can go back and I can help the medical industrial complex make bigger, better, faster widgets. And then we evolved again to the service industry. So now for $20, I can go ahead and I can order a birthday cake. I don't have to worry about any of the stuff on the front end. I just have to worry about the cleanup on the back end, which is great because it gives me more time to go back to work, to use the words that somebody else does, and to make a bigger, better, faster widget. But now for $150, I can pay to have the experience someplace else. I can go to Chuck E. Cheese. Great, because now I've got more time. This is pretty cool. Well, Fred Lee read this paper, and it inspired him in 2004 to write a book called If Disney Ran Your Hospital. And so he looked at this and he said, hey, what does this mean? What does this experience thing mean inside of healthcare? And so then you started to see this transformation. But it was on a grand scale because we like to sort of, share best practices. So it started to turn into, hey, how do we, get rid of visiting hours? How do we change the paint on the walls? How do we get more light into the rooms? How do we go from sharing rooms to private rooms? How do we do all this stuff? But I asked myself, did anyone actually talk to patients and see if this is what patients wanted? Or did we just use these metrics and these theories and just make a leap of faith that we never even tested? So 5 years ago, Jason Wolf and the Barrel Institute created this definition of the patient experience. Patient experience is the sum of all interactions shaped by an organization's culture that influence patient perceptions across the continuum of care. Now think about that. It's the interactions that influence my perceptions in my journey inside of healthcare. But where's the radiologist in that journey? I never see the white of his eyes. The words that you use to build my world that dictates the path that I'm going to take in this journey inside of healthcare is told by somebody else. Somebody else is navigating it. It's not the radiologists. Again, it goes back to the cardiologist, the oncologist, the neurologist, the nephrologist, and the endocrinologist. All of these people are using your words to build my world and tell a different story. And that's got to stop. Because you influence what goes on inside of my journey as a patient. And if I don't perceive that you're there in this value equation, then that's a problem. Which leads us to the next evolution of economics and something called the connection economy. So remember back to the example about baking a cake. What does this mean? And let's kind of focus a little bit more on radiology instead of baking a cake. Commodities, imaging equipment. Everyone's got them. That's the reality. The goods, they're the images. The service, it's the interpretation of those images in the radiology report. The experience, it's probably about the radiology department. But now if you decide to step out of the dark and into the light and look in the white of my eyes and explain this to me, now we connect. because now I've met a radiologist. Now we have a connection as humans. I understand you, you understand me. I get the fact of why you act and do the work that you do is because you want to have a profound impact on my journey. And that's what the connection economy is all about. It's about being human. So in a world of abundance of choice and endless options, there is a premium on attention and trust. This is the definition, via Seth Godin, of the connection economy. So think about that. The value is attention and trust. So here's how I equate the economics of this. So we're told inside of the industrial medical complex that value is outcomes divided by the cost. But in the connection economy, I as a patient, it's about attention and trust. So how do you earn trust? It's about having a transparent conversation. Can we have an open and honest dialogue about what's going on with me? And once we do that, can you help me along in the next step in my journey, in my transitions? But to do that, you need to spend time with me. And that's how I, as a patient, who has more control over the spend of dollars, that's how I define it. It's attention and trust. And right now, because you're not using your words that impact my world, you don't have my time, nor do you have my attention. So the internet. The internet is not just for YouTube watching videos of cats doing like crazy things. What the internet is it's a connection engine. Anyone in the world with a computer or cell phone that has the ability to connect to the internet can connect with anyone else. At this very point in time, I have close to 8,000 people that are following online of my talk. And I can guarantee you that the impressions that I make are not just defined in Washington, D.C., it's global. And I'm willing to bet that by the end of this conference, I will have almost 1 million impressions, and I'm an N of 1. So think about that. There's some simplistic things that all of you can do to own your words, to tell a story, and connect. Because that's the time that we live in. So I was advised not to try and get group participation, but I like to cause a little bit of a ruckus, so we're going to try something. So what I would like you to do is to clap your hands slowly, in unison, and in rhythm when I say go. And don't stop until I tell you to stop. So we'll do this on the count of 3, okay? 1, 2, 3. Stop. That took about 6 seconds. I'm highly impressed. So So the interesting thing is I've done this exercise before. I've done it with a group of about 1,000 primary care physicians, and it took them about 8 seconds. I've done this with one of the allergy groups. I won't say which one because they would not be happy with me. But it took them almost 20 seconds, which is crazy. But the interesting thing about this is that how did the people sitting at the table in Illinois know what the people way back there in the far corner, how they were going to clap? Let alone, do you even know each other? But somehow you figured it out. And why is that? It's because we're all human. Because you want to connect. Because you want to be part of something. Because you're radiologists. Because people like us do things like this. Because on an annual basis, radiologists decide to come to the annual ACR meeting because that's what you do. Because people like us do things like this. But now you just have to reframe it and realize that you need to let everyone else know about the stuff that you do. So how do we do this? creating value in healthcare. They warned me about this with my clicker, but I kind of have ADD and I need to have like my security blanket. So the connection economy comes down to 4 pillars. The first pillar is, do you have permission? Do you have the permission to talk to people, but more importantly, are they willing to listen? Do you have their trust? If this is the first time that we're meeting, do we trust that we know how to work together? How do we figure it out? How do we all clap hands together? The exchange of ideas. It's basically that the sum of us are greater than any of us. And coordination. There's a value in bringing a large group of radiologists together to descend on Washington, D.C. for a few days. And so what is that value? What is that coordination? Why do we all do this? So inside of healthcare, again, I've simplified this. It comes down to what I call the 4 T's. Are you willing to spend the time with me, the patient? And if you spend enough time with me, I'll give you my trust. And if you have my trust, we can have a transparent, open, and honest conversation where you can understand what my expectations are of you, and you can tell me and help me understand what what your expectations are of me as a patient. And together, you can help me manage my transitions along my journey inside of healthcare. And the choice is simple. You either choose to connect or you will be eliminated. And if you don't believe me, I'll go back to the example of Henry Ford, because I've been to Detroit and I've seen those empty factories. And that is a reality. But we have an opportunity to change all of that. And so that's why I encourage all of you to think about that and to step up and to own your words, because they impact my world, and show that value. And if you show me, I'll make sure that I spread it to at least 1 million people, if not more. And other people like me will do the same. And that's huge. But in order to do it, you have to be generous. You have to become the trusted node inside of your network. And so again, I think it's an introspective moment where we have to ask ourselves, am I the trusted node inside of my network? And is my network just confined to my practice? Or is it just confined to the College of Radiology? Or is it broader than that? And if it's not me, is it one of my partners inside of my practice that is a trusted node? And if the answer to either of those questions is no, then you need to figure out how to become a trusted node and build your network and expand that network outside of just the world of radiology to all of the 5 stakeholders: the patients, the providers, the payers, the politicians, the pharmaceutical and medical technology companies. Because they all need you, they just don't realize it. Because someone else is using your words that impact somebody else's world, and they're telling their own story the way that they want to, through their own lens, which devalues the impact and importance of radiology. So you're probably sitting there thinking, well, okay, you're a social media person, you're a cancer geek, you can go ahead and do all this stuff, so it's probably easier for you. Well, the first thing is I'm slightly older than what I actually look. And the second thing is that it is simple. It's as simple as picking up your phone and just deciding to connect with someone. So here's some examples. You first need to realize that it may not work. But that's okay, because that's what being an artist and being human means. It's risky, it's scary, it's gritty. But that's okay, because people will see that you actually tried, and that humanizes you, and that makes us want to connect more. So one of my friends, Dr. Rawson, has done a wonderful job of building a tribe in the world of Twitter. Whether it's ACR 2016, to Image Wisely, to something called Healthcare Leader, which is outside of the world of radiology, to patient experience, or reaching across the pond to the NHS, getting up at 3:30 or 4:30 in the morning and being part of the School for Healthcare Radicals. Dr. Rawson showed that he's someone that GSD, it's get stuff done. I added that, that's the clean version of GSD. Or Dr. Carlos, who decided to do something radically different and host a hackathon for the JACR. The challenge, as Dr. Hawkins described this morning, was to increase access to peer-reviewed medical literature for patients and families. Dr. Carlos decided that she was going to go directly to the patients and understand what the challenge was, and that she was going to partner with the 5 Ps, the patients, the providers, the payers, the politicians, and the pharma people, medical technology. And it was so successful that she had 100 people come to DC, spend the weekend, late hours, and work through this. 6 teams, 3 winners. But more importantly, she has a technology roadmap that within 12 months, she can actually make that happen. That's huge. And it was the power of connecting outside of radiology to solve a problem, to own the words that tell a different story that impact my world. Or my friend, Dr. Jha. This is something that I created as an ode to him because they were asking me, well, hey, how do we do other things? It's as simple as a summary report. I've created something like this in the world of cancer, where we basically said, hey, Mrs. Smith, we reviewed your images. And you know what? They're normal. But here's a key image. Here's my name. Here's a telephone number. And if you want to talk more, give us a call. It's something as simple to do. And it's even better if you do it versus a primary care or somebody else, because they're your words that build my world. And so I'm hearing it straight from you. Or it's about patients first. It's about using art as a social object to start a conversation and connect with other people. So you can see, again, Dr. Hawkins, Dr. Rawson, Dr. Carlos. We've got some key patient advocates here. We've got Casey Quinlan. We've got Andre Brande Kitts. And oh, hey, that top picture in the center, that's happening right now as we speak at the Patient Experience Summit at the Cleveland Clinic. So this extends well beyond the world of radiology. It starts with the patient, and it's about putting the me back into medicine at the N of 1. So there are some simplistic rules of healthcare that I've created. Again, I like to simplify things, but I also happen to be a movie buff. One of my favorite movies is Fight Club. And the reason why I like Fight Club is because the premise is, how do we fight against being a cog in the wheel of the Industrial Revolution and just doing what we're told to do, versus making a choice and doing something that's risky and connecting with other people? Because that's what the connection economy is all about. It's about being human. It's about connecting. So if anyone has watched the movie Fight Club, you know what the first 2 rules of Fight Club are. Does anyone know? Exactly. Perfect. So what are the first 2 rules of healthcare? Healthcare begins with the patient, and it ends with the patient. And if it doesn't begin and end with the patient, none of us exist. I don't exist, radiology doesn't exist, pathology exists, primary care, no one exists. If the patient doesn't show up, we're all gone. Healthcare is eliminated. which means that the third rule is that healthcare includes a physician, someone that chooses to perform the art of healing, and a team that's focused on me at the N of 1. Because you can only focus on one patient at a time. I was reading some tweets this morning from some of the radiologists. Actually, it was Rasu, and he was kind of talking about what 60 seconds in the world of radiology looks like with interpretations and multiple studies open. And my response was this: even as good as a radiologist is, you can only focus on one patient at a time. It's impacting a world at the N of 1. My world. Your words shape my world and the rest of the journey that I'm going to take inside of healthcare. Which means that if you decide to step away and into the light and meet with me and look me straight in the eyes, please turn off all rings, dings, pings, and other things. Because I'm trusting you with my attention and my time. And again, I can't stress this enough, but radiologists and pathologists have an opportunity to partner together and step out of the dark and into the light. To realize that the words you use in your interpretations shape worlds. Now, it may not necessarily always be the world that I wanted, because I didn't want to know that my dad had stage 4 metastatic pancreatic cancer. But I still appreciated it because I understood what that world meant. And that world and that story came from radiologists. Technology flattens the world. If you add technology for technology's sake, and it builds silos and adds complexity, then you need to think about, why did we add technology? Because technology, it's a connection machine, and it flattens the world. And so lastly, it's about the 4 T's of healthcare. Spend the time with me and earn my trust so that we can have an open and transparent and honest conversation, and help me manage the transitions of healthcare in my journey. And if you do that, you impact my life at the N of 1, and that is what scales. So some final thoughts. It's about realizing that the words that you use to build worlds, and then how do you sort of pivot and make sure that that story resonates with patients, providers, payers, politicians, and pharmaceutical and medical technology companies. And you have to do that. It's essential to the survival. And more importantly, I think it's going to flip this whole equation, and people are going to see that they need to give ever more importance and recognition to the world of radiology, because everything else that happens downstream with the oncologist, the cardiologist, and any other ologist that you want to think of, it's because of imaging. So healthcare, it begins here. It begins with why we went into medicine, why we decided to be radiologists. Because it's all about patients first. And you only have 2 gifts to give. The first gift is about why you went into medicine, and the second one is time. Because time is the one thing that we all have, and once we spend it, we can't return it and we can't get it back. It's gone forever. So make sure that you spend your time using your words to build worlds that impact me, and you own your story. Because people aren't the greatest asset for the College of Radiology. People are your only asset. So connect. So with that, I want to thank all of you for your time and attention this morning.